Reputation precedes you in many ways. I first heard about a producer that uses light bulbs and telephones and potatoes and things, and which I actually really like, because I've read a lot about the old days of recording when it was still being worked out and there was so much invention involved, and sometimes it feels like things have become more methodical and formulaic. Some of the imagination's gone.
Well, I think I wonder why more people aren't actually doing this, taking things apart. If you think of how people build hot rods these days,
yep.
They used to be really pristine and well thought out. But now the era of rat rods makes it so anything goes. So you can just put rusty tin cans on your car and it's cool.
Right,
so,
exactly.
So I'd kind of take that rat rod kind of mentality into the studio with me, and anything goes. We'll go down to the junk shop and find whatever we can to make microphones out of, or just to make noise out of, and it makes every session a little bit more interesting and custom.
Yeah. Do you have a theory on why that makes you unique when that really shouldn't make you unique, because we should all be that open-minded?
I think that recording has gotten kind of boring because everyone uses the same tools, the same sounds, the same pre-recorded sample libraries, and so it makes everything kind of sound generic, to me. So how do you make it sound different? Well, you either manipulate those sounds into something new, create your own sounds, create the instruments yourself, or use those instruments in different ways. So that's what I intend on doing. I hope I'm inspiring other people to do the same, because it has gotten really stagnant, I think.
Well, I mean, to focus on why though, like, do you think it's fear of failure, trying something and it not working, or is it something to do with the industry and things have got to be right for radio? Like, what do you think has made everyone become so narrow in their approach?
I think it's laziness, honestly. I think that people, if you don't have to mic a piano, then it's much easier just to call up a sample library of a good piano, and there's plenty of them.
Yeah.
So and who can blame most people for doing that? But something happens when you put a mic on a piano, and maybe not put a mic, a typical mic on a piano, but something else. Like I'll take a garden hose and stick a mic into the end of it, and then put that in the piano.
Right.
And that is a completely different sound.
Put the mic in the end of the hose. What do you mean?
Well, you tape the like an SM57.
Yeah.
Just tape it on the end of a garden hose. Right.
So the sound has to travel through the hose before it gets
That's
to the...
right. And then you would be very surprised at the different sound that you get. And then put that through a compressor. And it's really, really, really interesting and great sounding. It's a different sound.
And is this the way you've always thought? Like what were you like when you were a kid? Were you always someone that was, walking off the beaten path, as they say?
It's just I suppose is because I had a father who was a mechanical engineer and who used to build his own stereo equipment, kind of like the stereo thing that you have on your desk here,
which is now my monitor stand.
Homemade stereo. But he used to build his homemade tube stereos from kits,
right? Like
ICO and Dynakit and these things. So he built a tape machine when I was 2.
Wow.
And he put it into sound on sound setting, and he gave me a microphone and just sat me down on the floor with the microphone when I was a kid, and he couldn't get it away from me. It was echoing, and I would make a little baby sound and it would echo.
Yeah.
So I still have that tape somewhere. But yeah, that I think that set me on the path towards this kind of thing.
Yeah.
When I was 10, I think I started playing with cassettes and recording something on a cassette and then playing that on one cassette machine and recording on another.
Right.
In other words, I was kind of doing multi-tracking. So I would make these radio shows with the neighborhood kids, and
Nice.
I would direct the radio show and give them parts, and
what would be on the show?
It was like something about Tarzan, and I don't know.
Tarzan?
Yeah, I don't know. It was very strange and fun.
Do you mean you actually acted the parts out?
Yes.
Oh,
we
wow.
all had
So it's like a
part.
radio play.
Oh, it was
like
a radio play.
Proper
and
old school radio.
with sound effects, and then I had an old album with silent movie music, like the piano from silent movies. And then I used that as my background music. So
right.
I really got into it. It was, so when I was 10, I was already kind of thinking in that way.
Yeah.
And then the earliest professional recordings I did were pretty adventurous too. When I worked with Tool and Undertow, there was a budget, and so there was enough of a budget that I could buy 2 old Junker upright pianos.
Oh yeah.
And we rolled those into the studio at Grandmaster in Los Angeles, and I mic'd them up, and then Danny, the drummer, brought in his sawed-off shotgun, and we shot holes into the piano, and then I bought some sledgehammers and gave everyone a sledgehammer, and we smashed it to pieces, and then I took all those sounds and then sequenced them into a song. They at the end of the album, you'll hear it. It's called Disgustipated.
Right. Cool. Yeah, I clearly remember that album come out too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, were you musical growing up? Did you learn to play as well?
Well, my mother was an opera singer, and there was a lot of music in the house when I was growing up, but I was not really as interested as I was until later. I loved music, though. It was I think when I went to university in California that I became more interested in music. But I really wanted to explore graphic design and fine art as a career choice. But that, as soon as I discovered college radio, my direction changed.
Right.
And I started using these my skills at doing radio plays in a commercial kind of setup.
So, do you mean you started working for college radio?
Yeah.
Right.
And then commercial radio after that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that sort of became your day job for a while?
Yeah, that was my day job, and that actually opened up the doors for me to really know how to use the equipment.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah. And were you playing, because I read something about you being in punk bands and things.
Yes, I did get into, when I moved to San Francisco, I was in an all-girl punk band and an all-girl metal band.
Awesome.
And
what did you play?
I was a singer, and I played some guitar, but I'm really pretty horrible. But
isn't that kind of the vibe, though?
Well,
you don't have to be good.
That's why it worked.
You just lean in, right?
But I tried. I thought that I wanted to do that. That was my calling. But in fact, as soon as I got into recording my own band, I found that I was actually more valuable on the other side of the glass.
Right. Yeah. I had the opposite experience.
Is that right?
Yeah. I left school and got an internship in a studio because that sounded like more of a real,
job.
When you tell people you're trying to be a musician, they're kind of
Right.
like, whatever. But when you get a job in a studio, then it sounds a bit more real. But after 6 or 8 months or something, I just remember thinking I'm on the wrong side of the glass. I wanted to be on the other side. I set up this, we had the sax player come in, we were doing a radio jingle or something, and I had to go and set up his mic and everything and come back in, and I just thought, what am I doing? And I formalized my ambition. I've got to do this properly, or not at all. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's so would you consider that the being the musician was the better career choice?
Well, for me, it happened. That was right before everything started to change. The internet hadn't started really yet, and things like that. So now it seems like a whole different playing field, and I think musicians have to be engineers too, really, in many ways.
Yeah. You're right.
For so many reasons. Actually, a different guest on the show who works at one of the unis here, the audio unis, I asked him, why are there so many people studying to be audio engineers, and there's so few actual paid jobs out there? Like, where are all these kids going? And he said a lot of them are actually musicians who are just wanting to upskill so they have more control in their own home studios, or they can actually talk the language when they're in bigger studios. Yeah, I'm guessing these are a lot of the changes that you've noticed as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of students. I think there are several ways to go about working in the industry. But honestly, the most successful people that I know are people that got into it just because they love the music.
Right.
And they love the process and the creativity behind it. If you're getting into it because you think you're going to, that it's a wise career choice, I suggest not doing that. Because it took maybe 10 years of, eating top ramen and sleeping on the couch in my friend's flat to start making money.
Right.
That's not to say that once I started making money, it wasn't a good living, because it really has been substantial.
Sure.
But it's not easy, and you have to be patient, and you have to always be on top of your game
and proactive, right?
Yes,
because
you have to sell yourself.
Yeah, because I feel like any ambition that you start out with is going to change. You can't avoid that. Mm-hmm. It's almost like you've got to go out there and do as many things as you can, hoping that one of them's going to click. And a few years in, you kind of go, oh, I could actually quite enjoy doing this, and that didn't work, but I'll focus on this thing. And that's probably why so many people started in, let's say, a punk band and ended up being a producer.
Yeah, and I think that's really wise information, because I agree that the more you do, whether you're working on film music or even radio commercials, or art rock, or any style, any genre of music, that you become more familiar with the genres, and every time you finish a project, it's like pulling that handle on that slot machine. You have another chance to get a jackpot. Just get as many things done in all kinds of different areas of recording, and then something will hit.
That's right.
I did really well with the Tool records, but then I also became aware that I was going to get pigeonholed into this one genre of music.
Interesting. Like typecast in a way.
Yeah, and I didn't want to just be the producer who does, hard music or heavy, or metal or new metal.
So do you go and find the most opposite thing you can find?
Yes, I worked on a country western.
I was just going to say country.
That's right. I worked on the Johnny Cash record,
nice.
and that was, completely opposite from that. And then I've also spent a lot of time working on funk with Prince, so
one of my favorites of all time.
I got a variety of. I think that's really helped me too.
Yeah, the list of artists you've worked with is confusing and daunting. Usually, I like to make notes and read off a few names. I've got a few names written down, but it's just like pages and pages and pages. I mean,
I'm still pulling that handle on that slot machine.
And it's like, like right on this piece of paper here, Barbra Streisand followed by Smashing Pumpkins. I mean, those two you wouldn't expect to be in the same world. Yeah. I mean, what was that just always the way that you thought? Like, I'll take on whatever's in front of me, or with some of these things right off the deep end, and you were, you didn't know what you were doing, or
pretty much all of the above.
All of the above, yeah.
Sure. The equipment that you're using is the same pretty much in every scenario. So, and if there's something new that's particular to a certain genre, I want to know about it. Yeah. Even recently, I worked on a country swing band, which was a completely new genre for me. It was like old-timey swing, like Ernest Tubb, or anyway, there was an instrument that was being played, which I thought was a pedal steel. Yeah. Because it was a steel guitar, with a Hawaiian kind of sound. Yeah. And the player, who was a seasoned veteran of this type of instrument, he had to remind me, this is not a pedal steel, because I kept asking him to set up the pedal steel here, in the room, and he says, this is not a pedal steel, this is a steel guitar. Right. There's a big difference. See, so here I am. I've been doing this for 35 years, and I still didn't know the difference between a steel guitar and a pedal steel guitar.
Yeah, because I thought you were going to say a lap steel. Isn't a lap
and then there's a lap steel, too.
Isn't a lap steel the same but without the pedals? ish?
No, actually,
Okay.
the lap steel is a single piece of wood that you put on your lap, right? And you play. The steel guitar is the same thing on a table stand, and there may be multiple necks.
I see.
So there's a 3-neck steel.
Right.
Right? And then a pedal steel is the same thing that's controlled. The tunings are controlled with foot pedals.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
And they're three completely different instruments. I
Wow.
had no idea. But now I know.
Yeah. I didn't know either. I would have called that a table guitar. Doesn't a steel guitar? It's a bit misleading, isn't it? So it kind of makes me think of a dobro.
Well, the steel is not the
body?
What the material that the body's made of.
Yeah.
The steel is the thing that you hold in your hand. That you run across the strings.
The slide
and it's a weighted, round, cylindrical piece of metal.
Right.
Like they call it a steel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love those instruments.
I know, aren't they great?
Yeah, I mean, I loved, during the 90s, I was a teenager in the 90s, and it's when I first heard some of these other things come into rock and roll. First heard banjos and rock and roll.
Yeah,
and,
right.
You know, I was a big Ben Harper fan, and all the stuff he did with bottlenecks and lap steels and stuff. Loved that stuff. Yeah.
And imagine using these kind of instruments in other genres of music, you know.
Exactly.
And then you create a whole new genre. I was so excited about that.
But now you're so well known for the unusual approaches you take, but somewhere in the past you weren't. Somewhere in the past you were the new kid going, what if we do this? There must have been pushback, right? There must have been like old school thinkers or whatever going, what the hell's wrong with it?
Well, I suppose that depended on the people I was working with.
Yeah.
But most people were open to ideas if there was time and budget.
Yeah.
To allow for some experimentation.
Were you able to experiment when you were just engineering? Because I know that you did a lot of assistant engineering and things.
Well, when I worked with Rick, I would bring in different pieces of equipment that, not the typical compressors that you would find in the studios.
Right.
I because of my background in radio, I was really interested in broadcast compression.
Right. Okay.
Because there's a whole group of manufacturers that make compressors for radio that are not typical for studios, for music recording.
Yeah.
So I started dragging those things into the studio, and that was new and experimental in that sense. So we weren't actually doing a lot of weird recording on Johnny Cash, you know.
Right.
Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, you don't mess around with that. They sit down, because Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers was the backup band for the Johnny Cash records.
That's
that I worked
right. I
on.
forgot about that. Yeah.
So those people, they sit down. They sit down in front of the mics. They start playing. You have to be recording that first take, because that may be the take.
Yeah.
And you can't come back and say, okay, let's do it for real now, because really, honestly, they're going to play it once, maybe twice.
Yeah.
And they're going to give you the perfect performance every time.
Such a good band.
Such a good band.
Yeah. One of my favorite guitar players too is Mike Campbell.
Yeah, Mike Campbell. Yeah.
So much feel.
I think he's out on tour with Fleetwood Mac.
That's right. I still haven't heard that.
Yeah, I bet it's great.
It must be if Mike Campbell's in it.
I know, but even with that, Lindsey Buckingham came and played on that record with Johnny Cash and Tom Petty.
Oh, isn't that
so
funny?
There's all kind of a big family.
Yeah. So what was Tom like? Tom Petty?
Oh, he
seems so cool on film.
He's kind of cool.
Yeah.
He's kind of laid back, very laid back. I think he smoked a lot of pot.
Right. I got that feeling too. I can smell it when I'm watching the documentaries.
No, he was great and a friendly and kind soul.
He always came across as so kind of cool and chilled and relaxed.
Yeah.
And I wondered, how did he crack the whip when he had to? Did you ever see him crack the whip, I mean, I know his guys were all pros and he probably never had to worry too much about his band. But there must have been occasions where he wasn't happy and someone was dragging the line or something, right?
No, I never saw that, because they were a tight unit. They'd been working together for so long.
Yeah.
So, everyone pulled their weight.
Right.
And I think that's the same with any successful band, is that everyone needs to pull their weight. And especially starting out, you have to give everyone a job,
Yeah.
to either to promote or to drive the van or to, set up the bookings or whatever it is.
I suppose someone like that's got assistants as well, right? to do.
Well, when you got Tom Petty, everyone is so excited to work with them that there's no slackers, really.
Yeah. So were you ever starstruck? Like, did you ever have moments when you were intimidated?
Well, it's hard not to be intimidated when you're especially on that session, because it was Johnny Cash. I'm working with Rick Rubin, and
who in himself is just an absolute legend.
A bit intimidating, but not really. He's actually a really wonderful person too. But
sure.
Then there's Johnny Cash, and he's kind of he was a grandfatherly, tall, dressed in black fellow, and then Tom and the whole band. So that in itself was just intimidating.
It's a pretty big room.
Yeah, but then every time I turn around in the session, and the sessions kind of went on for 6 months, I would turn around and look at who's sitting in the couch in the back of the room, and it's like, holy cow. That's it. Because we had Mick Fleetwood come in, and then Lindsey Buckingham, and then Marty Stewart, and Carl Perkins came in. And June Carter Cash was there in the sessions too. So, and anybody who was, we were working at a studio. It was Ocean Way, which is now East West in Los Angeles, and and it's a large facility. So there were neighboring sessions. Everyone would stop in, and say, "Hey, what's going on over here?"
Yeah.
So it was just you get a little numb to it after a while. It's like, it's there's that guy, Yeah.
Well, a lot of people we've spoken to have talked about how you've sort of got to disconnect with it, because if you go into a situation like that as a fan, you actually kind of blow the dynamic in there. They're not there to be signing autographs; they're there to work.
No, and in fact, that would have been a big problem if I had gone in trying to get autographs and such. However,
Selfies.
I don't know. I'd probably go for a selfie now. We didn't have the selfies then.
Yeah.
But
and what was it like working with Prince? Another one of my heroes.
Oh boy, now that was really difficult. He
It doesn't surprise
would purposely try to intimidate, I think, and would. So everybody was on toes, on the tips of their toes the whole time. And he was very difficult, and I think the biggest problem with working with Prince was the lack of communication. So from Prince in exactly what he wanted to do, and especially just scheduling. Yeah. But the guy is a freaking genius. He was the most prolific and most talented musician I ever worked with. I mean, beyond like superhuman ability. Yeah. And so it was amazing just being a part of that whole thing. He had 2 studios at Larrabee running at the same time, and then another 2 studios at the record plant running at the during the same time. Right. So he would bounce between 4 rooms.
Working on the same project.
Well, working on a different song in every room.
Yeah.
And then he was able to record from beginning to end, from in the writing of the song, playing all the parts, writing and recording vocals, and mixing 2 songs a day in each room. Wow! So he was basically creating 8 songs a day for years.
No wonder those archives exist, eh?
Well, the archives, if they start, releasing these the unreleased tapes, they could go on for years and years. I mean, there was so much material. He was writing so much that I think the label just put the brakes on it, that they couldn't keep up with him, and I think it made him angry.
I don't know what you think, but I don't like the idea of them putting that stuff out. I feel like if he didn't want it out, it shouldn't be out.
Yeah. I think he did want it out, though. I think that the only reason it didn't come out was because the labels couldn't properly promote, and that the market was saturated with Prince music. So I think he did want it out, and I think it should be out. There's some great music.
If he wanted it out, then I would just hate to think that there's stuff that an artist like that would hear and go, man, it's not up to scratch, and then now after they've gone, now someone else decides. I felt like that happened to Michael Jackson's stuff.
Yeah, that may be.
Yeah.
But in Prince's case, I think it's all worthy.
Right.
Even the bad stuff is really good.
Yeah.
You know, there was no bad stuff really. It was there was a funny story. The album Diamonds and Pearls I was working on, and I would do some of the recording and on the project, and then I was also acting as an assistant on some of the songs on the record for another engineer, Keith Cohen, who was mixing. He was mixing a song. It was a new song called Get Off.
Okay.
And the album had already been finished. I mean, it was finished. It had already been mastered.
Yeah.
This Diamonds and Pearls record.
Yep. Great album.
So, yeah, great record, right? Mm. But the label didn't want to release it because they had just released an album like 4 months earlier. So they're like, no, we're not putting this out. So, and Prince is always writing more and more and more and more. So he wrote this Get Off song, and he knocked off a couple of the songs off of Diamonds and Pearls and replaced it with Get Off.
Right.
And I was kind of teed off about that because I didn't think Get Off was nearly as good as the stuff that he removed off the record.
Right, yeah.
This is my own personal opinion, which means nothing really. and I'm sitting in the session listening to the mix being finished of Get Off, and I'm sitting in the back of the room, and it's my job as an assistant to just kind of be available for the engineer if he needs something patched in or something. And so I was just writing. I had my journal, and I was writing in there, and I was writing, there's Prince sitting on his purple throne, and he's taking a perfectly good record, and he's ruining it with this song, Get Off. You know, and I'm writing this in my journal.
Yeah.
And, and Prince is sitting there with Keith up at the desk. And then Keith says, hey, Sylvia, can you patch this in? So I set the book down, and I go over to patch something into the patch bay. And then I hear Prince's voice. There's Prince sitting on his purple throne, taking a perfectly good... I was like, oh my God, he's reading my journal out loud. And I thought, oh, I am so fired. And I ran across the room and grabbed it out of his hand. You know? I was shaking. I was really scared.
And was he pissed or was he laughing?
He was laughing. He thought it was so funny. And after that, he gave me a lot more work.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Weird. And then in fact... offered me a job to move to Minneapolis, all expenses paid.
Wow.
To go to Paisley Park.
But I kind of get that because I can imagine for those, I mean, you've heard people talk about it before, that they get so many people around them just saying, yes, you're amazing, everything's brilliant.
Yes, yeah.
And to get pushback.
Well, I didn't do it to his face, did I?
No, but he obviously realized that, this is someone who's going to be straight up. If
he wanted to know my opinion, I definitely had
one.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that I was right about that song, Get Off. It was a big song for the record.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, but the funny thing is ultimately I didn't take the job.
Right. And why is that?
Because I just got asked to do the Tool album, and I was, going to produce the Tool record, and the choice was, producer or Prince's engineer.
Right.
And I wanted to be a producer, so I turned it down, and I never heard from him again after that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And at that point though, was Tool anyone? I mean,
no.
You worked on their first album, right?
Yeah, the EP, and the EP did well, and there was a lot of hope for the album, but they were still brand new.
So that was quite a big gamble for. I mean, retrospectively, it sounds like, oh yeah, just go and work with Tool, that's cool. But at the time,
sure,
like, who are Tool?
If I wanted a regular job,
yeah,
I would have gone to Paisley Park and had a fairly secure job.
Right.
But the creative input, I would have had a limited creative input.
Yeah.
I wanted to produce.
And maybe you would have ended up with a lot more closed doors because you were just doing one thing in one place.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
But, wow.
Yeah. So did you know, though, when you were working on Undertow that it was going to be big? Like, do you have a feeling sometimes when you're working on an album, like, this is different?
Sure. I mean, it was so different. And even when we finished it and listened to the masters, and we thought, this is really weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we like it, so okay,
Yeah.
But it really did sound different than anything else happening right then.
I remember when it came out, I was a young teenager, and it had like a kind of a mystery about it. It had had a reputation. And I can't remember who it was, but someone came out like, check this out. And as soon as I heard the line, Jesus, where's your fucking whistle? I'm like, holy shit, can you say that? Like, there was just something else about it, you know? Like Axl Rose had been swearing into the mic for years, but he had never gone at something like that aggressively, you know? Yeah.
And the other thing about the Tool Undertow record is that the songs aren't what you think they are.
No.
You know, it's like what is it? The song 4 Degrees, you think is about this, spiritual thing. Open up, and let it in. You think you're talking about God or something, but in fact, it's about anal sex. 4 degrees. Is the difference of temperature between the vaginal and the anal cavity.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, learn something every day.
There you go.
And can you find that in the lyrics, or do you just know the backstory?
Oh, no,
you
can find
literally?
It in the lyrics. Now when you listen to that song, just listen carefully to the lyrics and it makes sense.
Yeah. And I also read that you worked on the Love Roller Coaster song with the Chili's.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I loved that song when it came out.
All right, yeah.
Did you? What was your involvement with One Hot Minute?
Oh, I did some. It was actually more post editing and versions for Latin America.
Oh, right.
Different versions of the American album.
Yeah. And were they pretty? So did you actually work with them directly?
Oh,
much
yeah,
in
with
the studio?
the Love Roller Coaster.
Yep.
I did. Yeah, sure.
And were they a big party, like you'd imagine, or?
Oh my God! Well, Flea, I think, is a straight businessman. He's all about. Getting it done and just having a solid unit. I mean, without Flea, I think that everything would kind of fall apart a little bit. But he's kept it together, and they're a great band. Wow, yeah.
And have you noticed that bands always tend to have someone like that?
Yeah, I think it's important that there's someone that kind of is the responsible party.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because obviously you would have seen a lot of good scenarios and a lot of dysfunctional scenarios with artists and bands, right?
I have seen that, yeah.
And do you see it coming now when you meet a new band and you think, oh no, these guys are heading straight for the edge of a cliff? Or
recently I was working with a band called Thunder Pussy, and it's an all-girl lipstick lesbian kind of outfit, and they're super fun and super drunk all the time.
Right.
So, if that's their normal state of being, then I'm not going to tell them to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it works. If it works, it works.
Right.
If you sober up someone, you're going to get a completely different performance, and sometimes I just don't want to do that.
Yeah. Right. Oh, so you're talking creatively. I guess I meant more holistically, whether they might make great music but be about to blow apart on a personal level or professional level.
And I can help so much with that, but everybody has to kind of carry their own load.
Yeah, exactly. It's not really your problem, I guess, in some ways.
No.
But I've often thought that the old industry and the way everything really became massive in the 80s and so on, it allowed people like Prince to reach heights creatively. This is sort of a theory, this is not a statement, this is sort of a question. That because he was able to make so much money and become so famous and have so many resources with studios and technicians and musicians and so on, he could then get to even more, even greater heights as an artist. And it possibly also meant that artists like that went a bit more loopy, and...
Yeah, it's there's some good and bad about today's industry where there's a lot fewer development deals happening. So the money going into young artists there's not as much money going into that.
Right.
But time and time again, I've seen the young artists not be able to handle it when they're given fame, or even just a standard album budget. If they're not careful, it evaporates so quickly, and then they're stuck with nothing at the end of it, or a big debt towards the the label, because they forget if they're given $500,000 to make an album, that they have to pay that back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
with sales.
They don't talk about that. It's not exciting to talk about that, but
no,
it's not the rock and roll stereotype.
Yeah. And it was a different world then, because you could actually walk away from those those debts
Yeah.
as a musician. But now I think labels, if they're going to invest into a new artist, it has to be an artist that has already done the groundwork,
right,
that already has an audience built in. So there would be sales figures that they could show that they already have sold these amounts of downloads on their own, that they can sell out a show if they can bring 500 people out every night of the week. No matter where they go, then labels will want to back that, and then that'll push the artist to the next level.
So do you think that the days have gone when we'll see someone like Prince? Or do you
superstars.
think the superstars? Yeah,
I'm not sure how many more superstars there will be.
Right, or at least there might be big names, but they don't have the follow through that someone like Prince has. Because you've got big names in music, obviously, but they don't have the musical dexterity and depth that he had.
That's a great way of putting it, the musical dexterity. When I think of someone like Bowie or
another great example,
or the Beatles, that they were able to start with pop music, a very safe genre. And then with the fame, they were able to go and do what they wanted, which was make, you could look at Radiohead the same way. Their first albums were pop albums, and then they began to really do art. I mean, I hope that we'll see some of that happening in the future, but I think it's all going to have to be self-funded in some way.
Right. I mean, that's part of the challenge, I think, for a musician, is that you're spending so much of your time, if you're fully in it, you're spending so much of your time also doing your own accounts and booking your own tours and that kind of stuff. It's like it takes a hit on your practice time and your writing time, and I think that's one of the very pragmatic reasons why it's different.
Well, that's the biggest challenge, is how do you do it all, and how it's just like, if you can make your own overhead so low that you can afford to do your music the way that you want to do it, or maybe you're just self-funded some other way. Then you can make true art.
Do you think we're sort of off the hook now when it comes to worrying about commercial restraints when we're recording music, in the sense that we don't necessarily have to do a single in 3 minutes 30 or whatever, because who gives a shit anyway?
when I work with a new artist, I'll ask them straight up at the beginning, is this for art or is it for commerce?
Right.
Because if we're doing this to sell music, then we could go all the way with it. Let's write a car commercial. Let's just straight up write a car commercial. You get it placed, and then you can start a career that way.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe later on you can do art.
And do you ever go, okay, the rest of the album's art, but these 2 songs we're going to make the singles? Do you ever plan it like that?
Yeah. And I'll help them steer in the direction, if that's what they want to do. If it's really about it's like, if you want to make a career at writing music, you have to make those sacrifices up front.
Right.
Write car commercials.
Yeah.
Pizza commercials. and then see where it leads.
And when you are working on a song that is destined to be a single, do you have to pay attention to what's going on to somehow stay current, or do you have a different approach?
Oh yeah, musically, you want to be able to compete and to be on the right playlists. So it's a lot of what the instrumentation is. Or the production technique, how the vocal is treated, the style of music. If you want to compete, you can be creative with, following the trend. To a point. I think. But right now, in saying that, I mean, we're sitting right now in a room full of guitars, and I'm not sure guitar rock is doing really well right now. How are you doing?
I don't play rock, really.
You don't?
No. I as a session musician, I have to do a bit of everything. But
I see.
But no, my love is more in like funk and soul and
there you go,
that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, that's why Prince is one of my favorites, because I loved his space and his feel, and everything he played just felt amazing, and also Mike Campbell, one of the songs I always play people is Refugee, as a reference for guitar.
Yeah, sure.
Just the way that he doesn't play anything for something like 8 bars, and he does that one little thing, over the verse. which means that the pre-chorus, I think he strums one chord and it suddenly comes to life, which leaves so much dynamic room for the chorus. And to me, it's like this, every time I'm in a conversation about songwriting and dynamics and anything like that, I'm like, check out Refugee.
Okay, I'm going to do that,
it's
actually.
It's the most beautifully written song, I think, yeah.
Yeah, we're sitting in a room full of guitars, and it's, how is guitar rock doing right now? I'd say if you're going to choose instrumentation for a new recording, I think you want to go programmed.
Right.
Yeah. Which goes back to the beginning of our conversation, where I think that so many sounds people are just getting boring because they're using all the same sounds.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like people always, by the way, profile me as someone who's into rock. I think it's like some sort of reverse racism. They're kind of like, white dude with slightly long hair, he must like rock.
Sorry about that. I just assumed.
No. I think it's funny. Like I said to someone the other day, like if I was a black guy sitting here, you wouldn't have like defaulted to rock.
Right.
Someone recently completely cracked me up. And I take no offense. I think it's hilarious. But someone recently who didn't know me, we're actually recording a podcast as well, but off mic, he goes, and whoever you listen to, like, I don't know, Motorhead.
Right.
Motorhead. I mean, I know they're a great band, but that's not even my era. So, but it seems like there's a cycle for what's coming and going with music, to the point where it's another reason to be involved with a much wider variety.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because things, I mean, I think it seems to be like a musical revival every 5 minutes, of what's...
Well, remember the 80s, well, you were probably just a baby then, but the 80s had drum machines came in, and all of a sudden all the drummers were worried that their lives were over. You know, they were selling their kits because Lindrum and, so, but things came back around.
That's my dog, just in case anyone's hearing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Every now and then he does that randomly. What I was going to say about rock is that I grew up listening to rock as well as everything else, and I kind of got bored with it somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I never really figured out why until more recently. I think I put it together that there always seems to be within a genre of music a stage where the genre is relatively new and it progresses and it changes and it evolves. Happened to jazz, happened to blues, happened to pop, obviously, and then it often just gets to the point where it just gets stuck in a cycle, like it starts to repeat itself.
Yes, right.
And I think jazz went through that for a while, and now it's all opened up again. I think
it's back, isn't it?
It's really
jazz
back.
is the new sound.
It's really exciting.
Classic jazz too. That was for me a recent discovery, because I really hadn't. I kind of saved it,
right?
And then I started listening to Coltrane and Miles
Davis.
Early
Coltrane or the
early
freakier
Coltrane
stuff?
and early Miles, and wow,
amazing, right?
Yeah.
So good.
So to have that come back now is really exciting.
Well, that's what I feel. I mean, I completely agree. And I think jazz got very closed-minded there for a while, and now it's been opened up and mixed with hip-hop and funk and world music and stuff, and I think that's revived it. And I think that happened to rock. Rock evolved from the 50s through to the 90s somewhere around there. And then it kind of got stuck in a loop, and you got people now...
We're there.
I notice is musicians that define themselves before they start writing. They go, we play industrial punk grunge metal, and it's like, you haven't written a song yet. Why don't you follow the idea and see what you sound like at the end?
Right, yeah.
And like with production techniques, I think there's a lot of sort of formulaic approaches to production techniques with rock, where it just goes through the machine and all spits out sounding the same. When I think that's why it lost interest for me. So I think I've always been more interested in stuff that is going somewhere or pushing something. I mean, so I guess this comes back around to you when you're working with rock bands. Do you try to disrupt those formulas and those defaults?
Well, I'm always trying to bring in contrasts into music in any form. So, for instance, if we're recording a string quartet, which I love, the string arrangements like that, but I might actually, right in the middle of a string quartet, throw some bottles onto a concrete floor and have broken glass, because there's something very beautiful about that in a contrast, So in that sense, I'll try to combine genres as much as possible,
right.
to bring in ethnic percussion into something that was it sounds like a typical formula song,
yeah.
and then really make it into something different, but only when I'm given the permission to do that, you know. So yeah.
Is there a conversation that has to happen sometimes early in the process? You
Sure.
say, do you want me to just to do the safe job, or do you want me to really go to town on this?
Well, it usually starts with you know, how much of this has to be played live.
Right.
You know, if it has to be exactly, you know, played live, exactly what we do here in the studio, then that puts the handcuffs on me right away, which I'm okay with too. But it kind of takes the fun out of it.
Is
too.
that common these days, though? I feel like that's
still,
is it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I guess it just depends on the band, eh?
It does.
But there's so much live stuff now incorporates backing tracks and things that,
right,
you know, just doesn't. And also studio production, and at least to what I'm listening to, doesn't seem to be that concerned about whether it can be played live.
I know, I love that too.
Yeah, it's kind of.
I just got done with a project with the New Zealand Producers Series,
right,
at Roundhead Studios, where I was recording a band called Ha the Unclear.
Yep. Okay.
And this little band is a bit of a musy kind of sound,
oh,
you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we took it somewhere else.
So what did you do?
I had a girl choir come. You know, we created a girl choir.
Yep.
We had them playing their guitar solo bit through a string of Christmas lights, which gave it a completely different sound.
Right.
What else did we do? And then the best part was I had them add a really cool jazzy ending, an outro.
Yep.
Which lasted a couple minutes on the end,
nice.
just to take it somewhere else. And then we drenched that in reverb, and I had the singer use a cell phone to make a delay, a satellite delay.
Oh, wow.
And the way you do that is to have the singer sing into one cell phone while you have two other cell phones in the other room, mic'd up on a conference call on speakerphone.
Right.
So the singer is singing into the phone, and you're recording it as after it goes up to the satellite and comes back down on the other phones.
Right.
And it comes back in stereo. It's fantastic with a big feedback delay.
That's
and
so cool.
It really, the whole end of the song was drenched in this weird outer space. I mean, truly.
Yeah.
Outer space.
Yeah. It literally went through space.
It literally went through space. And it was a load of fun. You can really hear that kind of joy in the recording when you're doing things like that.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because I was just thinking how every time we start to talk about that kind of thing, you seem to light up like it.
Yeah, well, I can't help but smile when I think about these things. And then when I listen to the recordings back, it also gives me the shivers and makes me smile too. I mean, you know, that's what we want to do, right? Is to create recordings that transform our emotions.
That's so great. I mean, I think our industry in so many ways can sometimes knock the fun out of us and the joy out of us, and you can forget that stuff. So it's so nice to talk to someone who has stayed engaged with the innocent reason for doing it, which is just the fun of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your time today. I know you have to rush to the airport, but it's been lovely to talk.
It's been a great time in New Zealand.
See you next time.
Okay, bye.